3 months ago, Mia Turner had a corner office, a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a 5-year plan that felt as solid as concrete. Now she stood on the sagging porch of her late grandmother's cottage in Cedar Hollow, keys shaking in her hand, wondering how a person could lose absolutely everything in the space of a single season and somehow still be standing. The marketing firm she'd given 11 years to had folded overnight. A headline in the business section and a security guard walking her out with a cardboard box. The apartment went next, because 11 years of loyalty didn't come with much of a severance, and 2 months of unemployment ate through her savings faster than she ever thought possible. By the time the eviction notice came, Mia had already stopped flinching at bad news. She had simply gotten quiet. The particular kind of quiet that comes right before a person either breaks completely or finds something in themselves they didn't know was there. She came to Cedar Hollow because it was the only property left in her name. Her grandmother's cottage, willed to her 5 years ago, sitting empty and half forgotten, at the edge of a town she hadn't visited since the funeral. She had $140 in her checking account and a house she wasn't sure was even structurally sound. She didn't know, standing on that porch with the sun going down behind the pines, that the knock on her door the very next morning would be the first thing in 3 months that didn't feel like losing something. It would feel, against every instinct she had left, like the beginning of getting something back. The knock came just after 7, while Mia was still boiling water on a camp stove because the cottage's gas hadn't been turned on in years, and she couldn't yet afford the deposit to fix that either. She opened the door expecting a process server or a nosy neighbor, or one more piece of bad news dressed up as a stranger. Instead, she found a man in his early 30s, sleeves rolled up over forearms that had clearly done real work, a tool belt slung low on his hips, and an expression that seemed both apologetic and entirely unsurprised to find her, standing there looking like she hadn't slept properly in a week. His name was Sam Whitaker, and he ran the only construction and repair business left in Cedar Hollow. And he was there, he explained, because Mia's grandmother had hired him 8 years ago to fix the porch steps, and he'd simply never stopped checking on the place since, the way small towns do with property that once belonged to someone they loved. He wasn't there to collect anything. He wasn't there to deliver bad news. He was there, plainly and without ceremony, to ask if she needed help, because the roof had a soft spot over the east bedroom that was going to become a real problem come the next hard rain, and because word traveled fast in a town this size, and word was that Eleanor Turner's granddaughter had come home with nothing but a suitcase and a look on her face that Sam recognized because he'd worn that same look himself 4 years earlier, after his own life fell apart in ways he didn't talk about with strangers. Mia almost turned him away. Pride is a strange, stubborn thing, and she had exactly none of it left to spare on letting a stranger see how far she'd fallen. But something about the way he said it, not with pity, just with the flat practicality of a man offering to fix a roof because a roof needed fixing, made her let him in instead of shutting the door the way every instinct told her to. He walked the property with her that morning, pointing out problems with the same matter-of-fact tone he might use discussing the weather. The roof, the plumbing, a porch railing that would give way if anyone leaned on it wrong, wiring that hadn't been updated since her grandmother's time. It should have felt like one more overwhelming list on top of everything else already crushing her. Instead, something in Mia settled slightly, because for the first time in 3 months, someone was talking to her about a problem that actually had a solution, instead of one more door closing with no way back in. Cedar Hollow, it turned out, was the kind of town that noticed things, and it noticed Mia within a week. She learned slowly, painfully, The specific humiliation of grocery shopping with a budget calculated down to the dollar, of avoiding the pharmacy aisle, because even ibuprofen felt like a luxury she couldn't justify, of lying awake doing math in her head that never came out in her favor no matter how many times she ran the numbers. She learned, too, the particular kindness of a town where people didn't ask too many questions, but somehow still showed up. Mrs. Alvarez from the general store, leaving day-old bread on the porch with no note attached, the diner owner offering her 3 shifts a week waiting tables when she found out. Mia used to run marketing campaigns for a living and needed something, anything, to bring in cash while she figured out what came next. And there was Sam, who kept showing up in ways that were never quite charity and never quite nothing, fixing the roof over 2 long weekends in exchange for what he called town rate, which Mia later found out from the hardware store owner was roughly a third of what he charged anyone else. "You don't have to keep doing this," she told him one evening, the two of them sitting on the newly repaired porch steps, watching the sun drop behind the pines the same way it had the night she arrived, except this time the porch didn't feel like it was about to give way beneath her. "I know charity when I see it, even when it's dressed up as town rate." "It's not charity," Sam said. And there was something careful in the way he said it, like he was choosing each word to make sure it landed exactly right. "Your grandmother helped my mother out of a bad spot once years back, before I was old enough to really understand what was happening. Kept her from losing this exact house we're sitting in front of, actually. Back before it was your grandmother's. It used to belong to my family. 3 generations back, before hard times made my great-grandfather sell it. Eleanor Turner bought it fair, never held it over anyone, and my mother never forgot the kindness in how she did it. I'm not fixing your roof out of pity, Mia. I'm fixing it because your family already fixed something for mine once, and I don't forget things like that." It was the first time Mia had heard the full history of the cottage, and something in her chest loosened, slightly at the knowledge that this house, the one thing standing between her and total collapse, had always, in some quiet way, been a place where people helped each other back up. She found herself, in the weeks that followed, telling Sam things she hadn't said out loud to anyone since the layoff, the humiliation of watching 11 years of work evaporate overnight, the fear that kept her up most nights that she had become someone unrecognizable to the version of herself that once had a 5-year plan and floor-to-ceiling windows. Sam listened the way he did everything else, without flourish, without trying to fix her the way he fixed the roof, just present in a way that made the weight feel slightly less like something she had to carry entirely alone. He had his own version of the same story, though it took him longer to tell it. 4 years ago, Sam had been engaged, had a contracting business twice the size of what he ran now, 3 employees, and a truck that wasn't held, together with duct tape and stubbornness. Then his fiancée left 3 weeks before the wedding for a man in the city with better prospects, and in the mess of grief that followed, Sam made bad decisions with the business, took on debt he shouldn't have, lost 2 of his employees when he couldn't make payroll, and spent a year barely keeping the lights on before he clawed his way back to something stable, if smaller and humbler than what he'd built before. "I know what it's like to watch everything you built disappear because of one bad season," he told her one night, the 2 of them repairing a section of fence that had rotted through, sweat and dust, and the particular satisfaction of physical work that actually showed progress you could see. "I know what it's like to feel like the person you used to be got left behind somewhere you can't find your way back to." "Do you ever find your way back?" Mia asked, and it wasn't really a question about him anymore. "Not back," Sam said. "Forward, maybe, into someone a little different. I don't think you get the old version of yourself back. Not really. But you build something new out of what's left." Took me a long time to believe that was actually true, and not just Something people say to make you feel better. There was a complication neither of them saw, coming until it was all ready, sitting in Mia's mailbox. A letter from a regional development company called Bartlett Holdings, offering to buy the cottage and the surrounding 2 acres outright, at a price that would have solved every financial problem. Mia had in a single signature. They wanted the land for a small strip of vacation rentals, capitalizing on Cedar Hollow's growing reputation as a weekend getaway for city dwellers burnt out on exactly the kind of life Mia had just walked away from. The offer arrived on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, Mia found herself sitting across from a Bartlett representative at the diner during her shift break, listening to a number that would have felt impossible to refuse 3 months earlier. She didn't sign anything, but she didn't say no outright either. And word travels fast in a town the size of Cedar Hollow. By the following week, Sam had heard about the offer from the hardware store owner before Mia ever got the chance to mention it herself, and it put something cold and careful between them for the first time since he'd knocked on her door. "You're allowed to sell," Sam said, his voice tight in a way she hadn't heard from him before, the two of them standing in the unfinished sunroom while rain hammered the newly repaired roof. "It's your house. Your decision. I just wish I'd heard about it from you instead of from Pete at the hardware store." "I haven't decided anything," Mia said. "I don't even know if I want to sell. Sam, that number would fix every single problem I still have. The freelance work is good, but it's not stable yet. And some nights I still lie awake doing that same anxious math, just with smaller numbers than before." "I get that," Sam said, quieter now, some of the tightness easing out of his shoulders. "I do. This house is the only piece of my family's history still standing the way it used to be. And watching you consider handing it to a company that's going to bulldoze it for vacation condos feels like losing it all over again. Except this time I get to watch it happen, instead of just hearing about it. Secondhand from my grandfathers. Old stories." He paused, looking away toward the window. "That's not fair to put on you, though. It's your house. Your decision. I shouldn't have made it about what I stand to lose." Mia thought about it for 4 more days, turning the number over in her mind against the quieter, harder to quantify weight of everything Cedar Hollow had given her that no development check could replace. In the end, she drove back to the diner and told the Bartlett representative no. Not because the number wasn't tempting, but because she'd version of security that looked good on paper, and she wasn't ready to make that same mistake twice. With the first place, that had ever actually felt like home. The weeks turned into a month, then 2, and something shifted between them so gradually that neither one could point to the exact moment it happened. Mia picked up more shifts at the diner and started tentatively freelancing marketing work for 2 small local businesses who couldn't afford a big agency but desperately needed the help. Mrs. Alvarez's store and the diner itself, both of which saw a noticeable uptick in customers within weeks of Mia's first campaigns going up. She started sleeping through the night again. She stopped doing the anxious math at 3 a.m. quite so often. And she started, without quite meaning to, looking forward to the sound of Sam's truck pulling into the drive most evenings, ostensibly to check on some repair or another, though both of them had stopped pretending the repairs were really the point. The near kiss came on an evening in late autumn. The cottage finally repaired enough that it no longer felt like it might collapse around her. The two of them sitting on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee gone cold, watching the last of the light fade over the pines. Sam reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, an unplanned, instinctive gesture that surprised them both. And for a moment, the entire evening narrowed down to the small distance between them, close enough that neither one was pretending this was just about roofs and fences anymore. Then Mia's phone rang. It was her old firm's HR department. calling with unexpected news. A corporate restructuring meant they were rehiring a limited number of former employees, and Mia's name was on the short list, provided she could start within the week. In the city, at nearly her old salary, it should have felt like everything she'd, been hoping for since the day she lost the job in the first place. Instead, she sat with the phone in her hand long after the call ended, staring out at the pines, at the porch Sam had rebuilt with his own hands, at the life she had accidentally started building in the wreckage of the one she lost, and felt something that looked disturbingly like grief at the idea of leaving it. "You should take it," Sam said the next morning, when she told him, his voice carefully, even in a way that told her exactly how much effort it was costing him to say it. "It's everything you worked for. I'm not going to be the reason you don't go back to the life you built." "It's not that simple," Mia said. 3 months ago, I would have taken that call and been on a plane the same day. But I don't know if I want my old life back anymore, Sam. I don't know if that life was ever really mine, or if it was just something I built because I was too scared to ask myself what I actually wanted." "What do you actually want?" he asked, and there was something raw in the question. Mia didn't answer right away, because the honest answer terrified her more than the eviction notice had. She had spent 3 months rebuilding a life out of nothing, in a town that had shown her more genuine kindness in 90 days than the city had in 11 years, standing on a porch fixed by a man who had seen her at her absolute lowest and never once looked away. The old plan said, take the job, go back, reclaim the life she'd lost. But some quieter, truer part of her understood that the life she'd lost wasn't actually the one she wanted back. She spent 2 days wrestling with the decision, torn between the practical safety of a familiar salary and the terrifying uncertainty of choosing a life she was still building from scratch. She called her old boss and asked for 2 weeks to consider it, which bought her time but not clarity. And in that time she watched Cedar Hollow the way she hadn't let herself watch it before. Really watched it. The way Mrs. Alvarez remembered her coffee order without asking. The way the diner regulars had started calling her by name. The freelance clients, whose businesses were genuinely growing because of the work she was doing. Work that felt like it mattered in a way her old corporate campaigns never quite had. And she watched Sam, who kept his distance those 2 weeks, careful not to influence a decision he'd told her outright wasn't his to make, though the effort it clearly cost him to stay quiet said more than words would have. On the last night before she had to give her answer, Mia found Sam at the cottage, doing one final check on the porch railing, though it had been solid for weeks, the kind of unnecessary task a person invents when they need an excuse to be somewhere. "I'm not taking the job," she said, before he could ask, before she could talk herself out of it. "I called this afternoon and turned it down." Sam went very still. "Mia, don't make that decision because of—" "I'm not," she said. "I thought about it, really thought about it. And the truth is that job was never the life I wanted. It was just the life I ended up building because I was scared of what happens if you actually stop and ask what you want instead of what looks safest on paper. I lost my job and I lost my apartment. And for a while there, I lost pretty much all my hope too. And somewhere in the middle of losing everything, I found this town and this house, and you standing on my porch fixing things that needed fixing, without ever once making me feel like a charity case. I don't want to go back to a life that never really felt like mine. I want to stay here and build one that does." "That's not a small thing to give up," Sam said quietly, though something in his face had already started to soften into something like disbelieving hope. "A salary like that?" "No," Mia agreed. "It's not small. But neither is this." She gestured at the porch. The fence, the pines going dark against the evening sky, the whole quiet, rebuilt life she hadn't planned on, but somehow couldn't imagine leaving now. "I came here with nothing left but a suitcase and a house," I wasn't sure I could keep. I'm leaving that version of myself behind. Sam, not because I'm running from something anymore, because I finally found something worth staying for. He closed the distance between them then, the way he hadn't let himself do on the porch weeks earlier. And when he kissed her, it felt like every quiet act of care over the past 3 months. Every repaired board, every unspoken kindness, every evening he'd shown up without being asked, had finally been allowed to mean exactly what it always had. I built a wall a long time ago, Sam admitted, his forehead resting against hers. After my engagement fell apart, I told myself I wasn't going to let anyone else in, wasn't going to risk losing something like that twice. And then a woman with nothing left but a suitcase and more grit than she gave herself. Credit for showed up on the one property in this town that's always meant something to my family, and somehow you became the first person in 4 years. I actually wanted to let all the way in. I spent 11 years building a life that looked right on paper, Mia said. And it took losing every single piece of it to learn the difference between a life that looks successful and a life that actually feels like home. Turns out home was never about the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was about a porch that doesn't give way when you lean on it, and a person who shows up whether you ask him to or not. 6 months later, Mia's freelance marketing work had grown into a small agency of her own, run out of the cottage's newly renovated sunroom, with 3 local businesses as steady clients and 2 more on a waiting list. The cottage itself stood fully repaired, roof solid, porch railing sturdy enough for both of them to lean against most evenings, watching the sun go down the way they had that very first week. Except now there was nothing shaking in Mia's hands, nothing but quiet certainty about exactly where she belonged. Sam's business had grown too, steady work coming in from 2 neighboring towns once word spread about the quality of what he built, and some evenings, when the light hit the porch just right, Mia would think about the woman who arrived in Cedar Hollow with $140 and almost no hope left, and feel something like gratitude for every single thing she'd lost, because losing it all had been the only way she ever would have found this. A town, a porch, and a man who knocked on her door one ordinary morning and gave her back everything she thought was gone for good.